I'm Stef Sword Williams. I'm the founder and author of Fuck Being Humble. You can't be what you can't see. And in the UK, we are, as I've just said, very humble, very modest, very self-deprecating. Our need to be perfect or to be seen as this expert could actually be the thing that's stopping us from embracing, whether it's self-promotion or negotiating or taking on that thing that you've always wanted to do, that dream idea. You can't become perfect at something until you put your first foot forward.
Hey guys, and welcome back to another exciting episode of Catch Ups in My Kitchen with me, Georgia Simmons, host of the podcast. This podcast is about all things food, health and wellness, and this week I have in my kitchen Stef Sword Williams, the author of the book Fuck Being Humble. In this episode, we are touching on all things self-promotion, and in the UK, we are particularly bad at self-promoting. We are always very modest and the first to put ourselves down. But the truth is that is going to get us nowhere. So a quick backstory on how I met Stef. So I was actually at one of her talks when I took part in the NatWest Accelerator program when I had my first business, Greedy Vegan. I remember sitting in the audience and thinking, oh my God, I really needed to hear this. One day I really hoped to get Stef on the podcast, and today was the day. We touched on all things self-promoting, why we need to self-promote, how to be confident, but also be modest, how to highlight our successes, but also highlight our failures. This is the kick that you needed halfway through the year. Honestly, I loved this conversation with Stef so much. And I feel like no matter what you do, whether you are an entrepreneur, whether you work for a big corporate company, we are all our own brand and therefore we all need to self-promote. If you want to get that new opportunity or ask for that pay rise, self-promotion comes into all of this. I think you're all going to love this episode so much. If I could ask you all to please keep supporting the podcast, give this episode a like, share, subscribe. And if you've got a friend who is really self-doubting themselves, needs that bit of a kick, share this episode with them. Please enjoy, and as always, have a lovely rest of your day. Stef, welcome to my kitchen. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're so welcome. Do you mind giving a really quick elevator pitch? Who you are and what you do?
Absolutely. So I'm Stef Sword Williams. I'm the founder and author of Fuck Being Humble.
Love it.
I set up my business in 2018 to help people get over the fear of self-promotion and be unapologetically proud of who they are and all the great things they do. I really wanted to set up the business because I was sick of the way that professional development was being taught. The careers industry was quite boring and had been quite boring for a while, and there'd been no disruption in the space. It was always things like shoot for the stars or like chase your dreams, but there never seemed to be this like culturally relevant kind of unique perspective on how can we actually access the things that we want to go after. And I think so often it's because we are trained to behave in a certain way, and that really was like the insight into why I decided to call my business Fuck Being Humble. But now I deliver talks, workshops, keynote speeches for businesses, conferences, communities all around the world, helping to sort of spread that message and that movement, guiding people on the best way they can advocate for themselves.
I love this, and I think we are all particularly bad at it, which we're going to go into in more detail. But I met you at the NatWest Accelerator program doing something completely different, and I remember sitting there and being like, oh my God, this is so true. Like we might be proud of ourselves, but we'll never say we're proud of ourselves. Like we might have a good day, but we wouldn't say we have a good day because we feel like, oh, that's bragging or that's boasting or that's not fair on anyone else. And like we are always apologetic of our successes and of ourselves. So I think, yeah, I'm so excited to talk about this in more detail. We have a quick fire round about all things food, just to kick things off.
Let's do it. Yeah. I love this.
So cook in or eat out?
Eat out.
Okay. Favourite restaurant in London?
Ooh, Bubbler or Babala. I can never pronounce it.
I love that.
It's one of my go-to. I love it so much.
It is delicious.
Amazing food.
Yeah. What is your go-to Deliveroo?
I'd probably say at the moment chicken pad thai.
Oh yeah, good one. I love a pad thai. Go-to cuisine?
If I am ordering by myself, I love Chinese food, but I think on a whole, if I had to have one cuisine for the rest of my life, it would be Italian.
Yeah, can't go wrong. What's your go-to fridge or cupboard staple?
Oh, what a great question. I probably sound so boring. A Diet Coke
Ooh.
or a bag of crisps. I'm obsessed with crisps.
Yeah,
If anyone knows me, they know it. Crisps are a big part of my identity.
I love that.
I wish they weren't because I am quite hooked on them. But yeah, crisps and a Diet Coke are my like vice.
I love it. And what's your favourite dish to cook at home?
So I cook a really nice roasted butternut squash and pancetta risotto.
Ooh, delicious.
It's very out of character for me because I'm not the cook in my house. My partner does all the cooking. He's amazing. He also does the cleaning as well. So I've found a real diamond there.
Yeah.
And it's actually a Jamie Oliver recipe from like years ago. And I remember learning to make it. And risotto is not easy to make, but I really enjoy making it and it tastes amazing. So yeah, it's the one that everyone's like surprised I've made because I'm not a culinary whiz in the kitchen. But it is generally goes down pretty well.
I love that. Some of Jamie Oliver's are like just you can't go wrong.
They're really flavorful, but also like quite easy to follow. And I think that's it. It is pretty low effort, but for good taste. So yeah, that's probably my go-to.
I love it. Okay, right now back to fuck being humble. What does that even mean?
So for me, one of the things I observed when I was thinking about creating this whole idea was that we don't get the opportunities we want because we are too modest and we are too reserved and we don't speak about our successes as proudly as we could. And I worked in the advertising industry where our job is to sell stories, get people talking about our ideas, really build a buzz about the things we were sharing. And then when it came to talking about our own successes in the advertising industry, no one wanted to do it. So, for example, we would launch a campaign, but unless it was covered in industry press, we wouldn't dare post it online or like post it on our personal Instagrams or our LinkedIn because that would be too cringe. It's like, no, you need to only can you share if it's been accredited by someone in the media space. And I remember thinking, that is bizarre. Like, our job is to get stories out there. And there was an insight, and I guess a frustration there, that we are specialists in this space, but we have such an old school way of thinking that if we're good enough, other people will celebrate us. And that is really where the idea stemmed from, along with my own personal experience, having worked at different businesses, different companies, feeling overlooked, undervalued, unappreciated, having promotions promised and then fallen through, asking for a certain salary, telling me yes and then telling me no. And then when I handed in my notice, they would all of a sudden find that salary and that title. So just quite a few moments early on in my career that I found to be quite revealing as to what does and doesn't work when you're trying to get to certain points. And I ultimately realised that self-promotion is the most essential thing to help you grow in your career. You can be great at your job, but if nobody knows about it and nobody sees it, you're not going to see the results that you want to see. But I knew when I was coming up with this statement or this mission and the movement, I had to think of something that would ignite the spark in the individual. I wanted to think of a way that would get people who would not normally engage in professional development. In fact, they'd go nowhere near it. They'd find the whole thing too cringe to go, oh, wait a minute, maybe that does resonate with me. And so, yeah, obviously naming it Fuck Being Humble was very disruptive and still is to this point. It is something that we've been told for so long is the norm. Like, we've been told that the key to success is to be humble. So coming out with something that was so opposite to that statement, I think really did get people listening and thinking. Like you said, it got you thinking when you heard me speak. So yeah, my main goal with it was to try and create an empowerment message that would speak to any individual and would connect with them on an emotional level. Whether you would embrace professional development learning or not, we can all think of a time where maybe we were too humble and we missed out on an opportunity.
Yeah, completely. I have a story which kind of links exactly to what you just said. So I read your book when I first got it a couple of years ago, but I've been like rereading it in like the lead up to this, and I had it on the tube yesterday, and I had it open like proudly in front of me, and there's an old couple in front of me, and I saw them looking at the title of the book, and the lady like looked over at the man, like raised her eyebrows, and then he looked over and he raised his eyebrows back, and I was like, this is amazing. And I was just like not reading anymore, I was just watching them, and they were like really intrigued, and I couldn't work out, are they thinking how rude, or are they thinking so true, or like I wanted to know what their thoughts were, but like I couldn't ask. But it got their attention, and I wonder what went through their heads. Like, yeah,
it's a really interesting statement to get people thinking about the whole topic in general, and I guess that was the intention. If I just said, oh, it's really important to self-promote, people have been like, okay, cool, but there wasn't that thing that really like made them get out of bed and go, so I actually don't mind if people are offended. The point is that it may plant some seed in their mind to think about what that statement means, or what it means to them or the people around them. And the truth is, like, when you put things out there, you're literally not going to please everyone. Like, if we know anything from everything being online these days, is that you can't please everyone. But what I've been so happy to see over the years is, I often say that when you launch something, you've got like your immediate like hype girls that are there, like obsessed with the message, give me it now, need it. And I've had those people, which is great. Then I think you've got the people who are like, convince me a bit more, which is fine. Like, they follow my content, they need to engage with it, and then they're like, do you know what, I wasn't sure at first, but I'm on board with the message. And then I think I call them like the FOMO queens, where they're like, oh, everyone else is talking about it now, everyone else is getting into self-promotion, or everyone else is doing personal branding, maybe I should give that fuck being humble a try. And I think like knowing that there's different types of people that will or won't engage with your message at different times is a really normal part to starting a business or putting something out there. So yeah, for me, I'm glad, I'm very grateful to you, first of all, for reading the book in a public space, but I'm glad that it creates some reaction, because no reaction would be a waste of time.
Completely. And I think whether someone will say it or not, there's definitely a time when like someone may have been humble or wanted to shout about something and felt like they couldn't. So I feel like reading that, someone will definitely think, well, actually, it will get them thinking about their own experiences for sure.
Hopefully.
So why does being modest not really work?
So, a full caveat, of course I believe in being humble, and of course I believe in being modest. I always make the joke that if you came up to me after an event and you were like, that was amazing, I'm not going to be like, I know, I'm fucking brilliant. I'm not going to turn around and say that. At that point I would be modest, and I would be gracious, and I would say thank you so much for those kind words. What I think we have a problem with is being modest in almost all situations. So being modest in a performance review, not a good idea. Being modest in an interview, not a good idea. Being modest in a job application, not a good idea. So for me, it's kind of getting across those key points when we need to dial up modesty and dial it down. And I think there's a way to be gracious, but also self-promote and talk about how good you are and the value you can add. But I think we have such a black and white version of that right now, where people are like, you're either modest and humble, or you're self-involved and you're arrogant. And for me, there's a really clear distinctive point in between that dial or that spectrum, where you say, I'm bang in the middle, where I don't want to be arrogant and I don't want to be seen to only be caring about myself, but I also don't want to be so quiet and like deserving of myself that I miss out on things. So it's really trying to tap into any moments where you might have looked back and thought, God, I wish I'd have just spoke up at that point. I wish I hadn't have been modest at that point. I really want people to zone into those moments and think about what might be different. Had you have just backed yourself a bit more? You know, might you have got more money? Might you have got that opportunity? Might you have dodged a bad situation? You know, there's things that can really help us in those moments when we need to sort of support ourselves. And I think one of the things that, especially in the UK, we struggle with is that we're so self-deprecating that it becomes the norm to take the mick out of yourself, to mock yourself. And I do it too, but I have managed to strike the balance between mocking myself and laughing at the fact that I've got typos and typical me, that I'm late to this thing, or I tripped up when I got on stage, with, but I did a really good job. or I'm really proud of myself, I smashed it today. Like, it's finding that balance. But so often what we do is just mock ourselves publicly, and we don't actually make up for the other part of the story of communicating the things we do well.
Yeah, why aren't we good at it in the UK? Because like my question is like compared to those in the US where we're very, very different in the way we go about things.
So I get asked this question a lot, and I think there's lots of different things at play. First of all, I think role models are really important. You can't be what you can't see. And in the UK, we are, as I've just said, very humble, very modest, very self-deprecating. So to step away from that characteristic or that vibe can feel quite jarring, can feel quite scary, can feel quite daunting. And I, as an individual, I'm someone that's really trying to act as a role model, to show people that you can self-promote without being arrogant, but to encourage other people to do the same, because we will see more positive results. I also think a big part of it is around like privilege and being told that you will access things or you won't access things. So if you're from a wealthy family, from a well-off background, and you know you may not have to work that hard to put yourself out there. You may be given, you know, a book of contacts, or you might have a trust fund to fall back on, or you might inherit wealth. So actually the need to go out there and self-promote has not been as high for you. But I know from running a business that self-promotion is like essential for your business to succeed. It is not a luxury. It is not a privilege. It is something that you have to do. And I think there's a lot of privilege in this country where so many people have not had to self-promote, and they've kind of created a culture where it's embarrassing to do that, ignoring the fact that so many of us do need to do that in order to pay for our houses and our livelihood. So if you think about market stall owners, when they're shouting on the street like, buy your 2 or 3 veg for £4 and all of that, that's because they need to hustle. That's because they need to make those sales in order to pay for their lives. So I think there's a big conversation to be had around whether there's a level of privilege not needing to self-promote. And I also just think that, you know, the way that we have been presenting ourselves, and I think it's been really interesting watching the pandemic shift people's mindset, because prior to this we had job security, we had pensions, we had things, you know, you're locked in for life. And if the pandemic taught us anything, is just how quickly all of that can get flipped on its head. So when it comes to being modest, and when it comes to the differences in markets and stuff, I think we're actually seeing a change. Even in America, like I've been going out to the US and I've been building my brand out there, and not everyone is good at self-promoting. Like I think it's a little bit of a myth that everyone's just confident and everyone's better out there. I do think post-pandemic, it's made everyone be more open to the idea of self-promotion, because we can't necessarily afford to be modest all the time.
It's so true. I also think the difference between the UK and the US is the way it's necessarily received.
Yes.
Like in the UK, if someone was like, oh my God, I just like had a really great meeting, I think I performed really well, you'd be like, all right, calm down.
Why are you telling me that?
Why are you telling me that?
Yeah.
Where in the US, I feel like it's like, oh my God, well done, that's so great. Like, I'm so proud of you. I think it's a way it's I feel like we respond in a different way.
So I did a video when I came back from New York in February, talking about the delusional confidence that New Yorkers have and why it was so infectious and why I loved every single minute of it. So everybody was so eager to be like, yeah, I'm doing this, I'm going to be here, I'm going these places, and you'll see me there in a few years. Nobody was shy about talking about their ambitions, their goals. And I think it was quite interesting to see the difference of like, we would be like, God, they're so delusional. They just assume things are going to work out. But actually, I'd rather have that delusional confidence than no confidence at all. And it was quite interesting to me to see that we don't even talk about our successes when they happen, let alone talk about our future ambitions publicly, because heaven forbid that didn't work out. So it's been really interesting for me to observe. You're right, it is about how it's received more than anything. And when I was writing my book, I came up with this phrase, FOSS, the fear of sounding stupid. And I think that lands hardest here in the UK, because we are worried we're going to sound stupid. I don't think I'd worry about sounding stupid in the US if I talked about my successes. They'd be like, amazing, you're incredible, more of you please.
Yeah.
And it's just a difference in perspective. And I know from the people that I've spoken to that are from the US originally and they are living in the UK, how much they've told me they've had to dial themselves down. and they've watered themselves down and they've diluted themselves. So there's definitely a difference in our approach, but I do think we need to avoid the generalization that they're just better at it than we are, because I've been delivering talks and workshops out there. People do need confidence building in lots of different ways. I think there's just, like you say, different responses and different ways that people are comfortable with doing it.
Completely. And confidence is a big part of this, because one of my questions was like, how do you self-promote if you're not confident? Because that's really, really hard.
So one thing that I'm always keen to try and bust is this introvert versus extrovert mindset, because I think what that can do is, if it helps you, great. But I think these labels can have a negative impact on how we see ourselves. So if we say we're not confident, I'm not good at self-promotion, well, then we're going to believe that statement, and we're not going to be good at self-promotion. But one of the things that I often remind people is, like, introverts, for example, are incredible at networking because they don't just talk about themselves. They ask loads of questions, because the thought of talking about themselves would be too embarrassing or too overwhelming. So they will ask loads of questions, make the other person feel heard, and when they're eventually ready to say something, they'll probably pitch themselves better than the extrovert in the room who is seeking for everyone to hear them.
Yeah, that's so true.
So this is where I'm really mindful of, people saying like, oh, I'm not confident, so I just won't be good at it. I think it's about finding the version of self-promotion that works for you. So whether that is giving your boss updates via email, because saying things might feel a bit cringe, or whether it's sharing ideas not publicly in the meeting, but possibly to the side to one of your colleagues, because you're nervous about everybody looking at you whilst you're in the room. You could share it with them ahead of the meeting, and then maybe they could share it on behalf of you. And there's ways that you can get your value across without it being, I'm standing on a chair with a megaphone showing how good I am. Yeah. And I think that's what online is actually quite great for, is a few things. You don't have to see people's responses, facial responses. Yes, you're putting it out into the world, but really all you're looking for is like a like, or there's a comment sort of thing, but you don't have to visually respond. And one thing that I like to share as well, there's a great book by Robert Poynton called Do Improvise. And in the book, he talks about the fact that every conversation we ever have is improvised. We never truly know what someone's going to say back to us, but we always manage to navigate it. And I think the same goes with self-promotion, is that like, we don't know what people will say, but you've done loads of things in the past where you don't know what people will say. So if that can help anyone who struggles with confidence, I kind of just wanted to share that, because I think this fear of judgment comes in so much, but there's a fear of judgment with what we wear. There's a fear of judgment on what coffee you drink, or if you don't drink coffee. There's so many things that you've managed to get through despite those worries about what people may say, that actually this is the thing that may actually have a really positive impact. And I did a post where I made a list of all the amazing things that could happen with self-promotion, which were about 25 things, and all the bad things that could come out. And the bad things were people mock you, you cringe at yourself, or you worry about what people think. Yeah. Versus the endless great opportunities that could come off the back of it. And I think when you weigh it up like that, it's more about courage. So I listened to a great podcast where they said, like, courage comes before confidence. I wasn't the most confident public speaker when I went out on stages, but I had the courage to back myself. So if you're going to focus on anything, I'd encourage you more to grow your courage and bravery to step forward, because confidence comes the more that you do something.
Yeah, completely. And I guess that kind of links to my other question, where it's like confidence versus competence. And like, you may not back yourself, but you are actually quite good at it. Or like, you don't believe you're good, but you have been doing this for like 10 years now. So it's just, you're used to it. So I guess that also comes into it. And also practice makes perfect. We weren't all born self-promoters. I guess depending on your background, depending on your family structure, depending on your career, you get put into different positions where you have to self-promote, or you don't have to self-promote. And I kind of want to touch on like, self-promotion is only for the self-employed, because like, on my personal experience, I've been self-employed now for a while, and you're constantly going to events on your own. Hi, who are you? Right, here we go, pitch ready. And you're just constantly rinse and repeat, like, I'm this, I do this, who are you? And like, you're used to it because I have no one else to go with. It's a one-man band, like, and you're probably the same, like, you're used to that now. Whereas if you work in a bigger team, you have the backing of, maybe you've got a title, maybe you've got your employees around you, maybe you've got your boss next to you, and like, you maybe don't have to self-promote because they can do it for you. But I think self-promoting is for everyone, but in different ways, depending on your career.
It's interesting because I completely agree. I think people don't invest in self-promotion. They don't invest in networking because they're like, oh, I'm not self-employed, so I don't need to do that. And I honestly think that's the biggest mistake you'll make, because I guess from my experience, it was moments where I realised my boss wasn't watching my every move, and they weren't backing me, and they weren't shouting my name in rooms, that I realised, oh, I need to take control of this. So I think it's equally as important, whether you're working at a company or whether you're self-employed, that you take this seriously. And most importantly, it's about you choosing the narrative for yourself. If you let other people do it for you, you're not in control of that situation. You can't say that you tried everything. But if you are the person self-promoting, and you're also telling your boss the great things, and you're also mentioning it to your colleagues, then at least you know you covered off all bases. But the risk is putting your success in the hands of other people. I think it's a really big mistake to make. I've made it, and I've been sorely disappointed. And since taking control of my own story, my own self-promotion, the version of me that I want to be known for, I have seen so much better results. And I don't have this what if, I don't have this if only I'd have done this feeling that I know we can often have. And you know that thing where you're like, oh, I'm kicking myself that I didn't do. I don't kick myself.
Yeah.
I don't, because I know that I've covered myself, and if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. But at least I know I can say I 100% tried and I did as much as I possibly could. And I think the people that have the biggest regrets in life are the ones that didn't choose to back themselves, or didn't invest just that bit of extra time in, I don't know, reflecting before you went into your performance review, or sending your boss those positive emails you got from your clients, or capturing those like testimonials from your clients. Like they're all important things that you need to have. You need to have this folder of progress, because not only does it help with convincing other people, but it helps with yourself. Like it's so, like you mentioned about the competence versus confidence, and one of the things I've realized is we often don't think we can say we're good at something until we're amazing at it. And I know when I got approached to write my book, I was asked to write a book within the first, I launched Fuck Being Humble in June, and I got approached to write a book in August. So they were like, you should be writing this. And I got a book deal in the first 6 months, and I was not a writer. So when they approached me, I was like, no, I'm fine, thanks, not for me, see you later. And really and truly, it wasn't that I didn't enjoy writing, it wasn't that I hadn't done it before, it was that nobody had celebrated me for it. It was that I didn't think it was the best skill of mine, so I wasn't going to do it. And I was definitely too like revealing or vulnerable for me to do something so public, because, you know, what if people said it was terrible? And I think it was after I saw the impact Fuck Being Humble was having through its events that I thought, this has the ability to reach more people if I get over myself. And I wrote in the opening chapter of the book, like, I could have waited 20 years to write this book until I was an expert in writing, but I wanted to share my thinking now because I think it could help people sooner. And my need to be perfect at this can take a back seat, because I think I can help people in some way, shape or form right now. And I think it's just a good reminder to anyone listening that our need to be perfect or to be seen as this expert could actually be the thing that's stopping us from embracing, whether it's self-promotion or negotiating or taking on that thing that you've always wanted to do, that dream idea. You can't become perfect at something until you put your first foot forward.
Completely. And I remember when someone came to me and was like, oh, do you mind helping me set up my podcast? And I was like, no, that's not my job. Like, that's not my expertise. I'm like, hold on a minute. That's what I do. Actually, I could do that. And like, that's why they've come to me, because they can see that I can do that. And I was like, it's a whole like shift. You don't think, I'm not the expert, why don't you find, you know? And so many people have said to me, oh, like, what did you study to become a podcast host? And I was like, Nothing.
Yeah.
I just bought some mics, plugged them
I'm
in.
the poster girl of being self-taught on everything. I mean, we were talking about this before the podcast started, like everything across social media, running a business. I did share this recently. I was like, have never been professionally trained, and I've written a book that has sold over 10,000 copies. I've never been professionally trained in speaking, but I delivered a TEDx talk, and my talks have reached people in 50 countries. And I've never had any training in running a business, but I've built a 6-figure business. So it is more about the mindset and the self-belief and the ability to throw yourself into something. And it's this thing, you know, self-belief is the ability that you can do something with or without the skills. And that's really what we should be getting closer to do, is the belief, not that you need to have done it, it's the belief that you could do it. And another thing I wanted to share that might be helpful to everyone listening is choosing to be a contributor and not an expert. So your example you just gave on podcasting, you're not claiming to be the best podcaster or have all the best knowledge on it, but you can contribute to helping that person as they learn how to podcast. You're not claiming you are the expert. And that's a really helpful mindset shift on be a contributor. Don't feel the pressure to need to be an expert.
Yeah, and I think people value contributors more than experts anyway. They probably listen to them more. Which I think is quite important, because in your book you could have mentioned like highlighting your failures as well as your successes, and I think that's quite good, because no one wants to listen to a perfectionist. No one wants to listen to someone who, like, sometimes it's intimidating, they can't relate. Or I think being vulnerable is also good, but then that's not meaning you're self-promoting. You're just saying like, I'm really great at this, oh god, I'm terrible at that part, but I'm really good at this. And I think that's quite a nice way to kind of balance it.
Yeah, it's funny. I shared online today. In the last 7 days, I've lost 4 opportunities, and I've seen my phone has been going off all morning, basically with notifications of people saying, "I feel the same. Thank you for your transparency. Thank you for your honesty." So yeah, this whole like sharing things not going right and failures and being open about it. I'm pretty convinced my followers feel more connected when I do share these, and it's really about me trusting myself that actually it's not going to affect my reputation sharing the things that didn't happen or the things that have fallen through, because I have built enough credibility in the space, and I am only human and we can't win everything. And I do think it just really connects with people when you share those stories. And I shared it in the book actually, where I talked about when I first launched Fuck Being Humble, I got some posters made and I basically misspelt my own brand on the posters, and it took someone 3 days into a festival of me exhibiting for them to point out there's no asterisks in the FUCK. And I was like, oh my god, like that's my brand, like how have I got that so wrong? But I actually kept those posters, and I kept them for the entire year that I was running those events, and I put them up all around the building, and every time I saw them I kind of smiled and laughed. And it's such a good reminder of like, things are going to go wrong, but it really doesn't define you, doesn't define your identity, it doesn't define your life, it doesn't define your personality. And there is such good things that can come from bonding with each other on like the highs and lows of things not working. And I was texting a friend last week about losing these 4 opportunities, and her first reply was, it's funny, I'm going through something quite similar. And I could feel my whole body just go, oh. Yeah. And there's this kind of desire and this want to connect over sometimes things that are a bit shit. And you know, we can all be great cheerleaders and hype girls, and I'm so happy for the people around me when they do great, but you also are just human, and you can't help but compare yourself and struggle when those losses happen. So it is important to talk about the failures or the things that didn't happen, and to not necessarily see it as a representation of where you are forever, but a moment in time.
Yeah, so true. And I want to kind of like reflect on what you just said then and compare it to fake it till you make it, because I think sharing your failures and sharing the lows is a new thing that people are appreciating. I think probably the rise of social media, and like people like transparency and honesty and authenticity, and people relate to that. But there's also a level of fake it till you make it, where what do you share and when do you put up the brand and the good, and who's going to buy from a failing business, or who's going to want to follow someone who's failing? So where does that come into it?
I think that's such a good question. I don't think we talk enough about this, because this is something that I'm a motivational speaker. So if my entire account was not very motivating,
Right.
it wouldn't engage with people in that way. I think the statement "fake it till you make it" is slightly flawed, and it has come under criticism over the recent years because it sets people up to get into environments where they feel kind of out of their depth. My statement that I put in my book and I promote a lot is blag now, worry later. So blagging, the actual definition of that is to convince people you can do something. And I often say worry later because 9 times out of 10 you will figure it out because you've put yourself in that situation and you will make it work. But also you don't end up having to worry later because you do actually have it in you. And I think it's a different sentiment and a different tone to fake it till you make it, because that's actually where we see CEO founders fudging numbers and getting to the top and it all being based on lies and all of those things. And actually that's where the problems come in, and that's where we're seeing quite high level profile people at the moment being teared down because their stories didn't quite add up, or that, you know, and it's there's things like that where it's actually not helpful to your personal brand. Whereas I think this like blagging now and worrying later is like, even if you have overestimated something, you worry later and you sort it out, you make it happen, and you go get that extra bit of training because you want to make sure you deliver it well. It's that kind of thing that I think is a slightly more positive statement. I think with regards to what we share in terms of the highs and lows and what is enough and what's not, I believe that we have a responsibility to share things that don't always work out, because if all we do is share the highlights, that we've seen studies how it affects young people, how it affects people's mental health, it of course isn't going to help people in the long run, and it's probably not going to build that community and that connection with people that you want. But I do think it is about figuring out your version of that, because I've followed a lot of founders and creators who are quite moany, and they're moaning and they're also taking your money. And it's like, okay, well, what is it? Do you want to be doing this job, or do you just want my membership fee? And, you know, so it is a very fine line to balance. I would say my advice that I often give to people is always try and offer some piece of value. Always try and offer an insight, or try and offer a learning or something that people could benefit from. It's like when you spin a negative into a positive in a interview. It's the same with when you're sharing something that's gone wrong or vulnerable. It's what's your learning from that? What can somebody else take from that? Why are you sharing this, and how would it help the person seeing this avoid that in the future? Because then what you're doing is you're leading by example. You're not leading as a failure.
Yeah.
Do you see that there's a
like,
slight...
you don't want the pity follows.
Yeah, it's not that. You're actually owning the story. And again, it comes back to owning the story and the narrative. It's, do I want people to find out about this in where it doesn't shine a light? Or do I want to go, yeah, this happened, here's what I learned, and here's how I'm rectifying it. And actually that shows your ability to move on. It shows your resilience, your leadership skills. So it's that thing of like, people are going to have an opinion either way.
Yeah.
It goes across the whole of self-promotion. People are going to have an opinion no matter what you say and do. So you can influence that failure, or you can share that in a way that is more controlled if you are the person sharing it.
Yeah.
But I think you've got to find your own rhythm and your own mix. And, you know, sometimes you might put something out there and people don't get it, and that's fine. Or maybe sometimes it needs to be said in a video, or maybe it's actually not a piece of content. You know, I've been through something recently and it's not made it online, because actually not everything needs to be content online. So I think if you can share some level of insight, value, or usable kind of insight that people can benefit from, then it can be useful. But I think if there's a negative, my life is awful, this isn't going to help anyone, and I just want to vent, that could probably be saved for the WhatsApp chat.
Yeah, completely. I remember when I had my business Greedy Vegan, I used to always post like, we're doing great, and like, these are my orders for the week. And I used to be very honest and open, but I would only share the good stuff. I wouldn't share the bad stuff, because I was like, there's a lot more bad than good, and I don't want people to buy from a failing business. Anyway, one day I went to do an event, and I was just going to take everyone along with me on socials. I filmed the whole thing, starting here, packing up the little fridge on wheels, taking it on the tube, like the whole thing was filmed. Get to the event space, I'm setting it all up, filmed everything, and basically no one showed up. And that was like part of the video. Like, I didn't mean to capture that, but that was clearly captured. And then I just sort of like broke down and cried in the room, and I just thought, you know what, I am going to film this part.
Good.
So I filmed like crying, and anyway, I put that online, and like, oh my god, the reaction was crazy. And I was like, this is just typical. Like, I share everything all the time, and the minute I show you that I am crying because I'm at rock bottom is the minute that I get all these responses. And it was a really interesting moment for me, where I was like, people do want to see the lows as well as the highs, but you're right, it's how you navigate it and how you phrase it that's kind of important.
I think what I'm always so impressed by as well is the power of like online community and connection. So I've seen people who've been like, I don't know if you saw, there was a great woman who made a video about being made redundant. She called Martha, and she made this great trailer. Now, she's been made redundant. She could have done I'm really sad I've been made redundant. I'd worked really hard and like, I don't deserve this sad post. What she decided to do was make this epic video, which was like a show reel about how great she was and how she was branding herself. The internet went mad for it. And that's a really great example of taking a negative and spinning it into a positive. And people were, I think she had like 150,000 reshares. Like, people were trying to offer her jobs, people were doing it. And that's because she took the opportunity to think about, how do I take this experience and how do I want to share it?
So true.
Everything is about that intentionality. And sometimes you may just be sharing something negative, you know, but sometimes there may be like, if I think 10 steps ahead, there are 10 different ways I could share this right now. What's the thing that's going to help me get the next opportunity? And again, it's not about like being calculated or like being like I don't know, like strategic in a negative way. It's about being strategic in a long term. And, you know, you might share that story about nobody turning up to your event that day, and then saying like, you know, you might have ended that off with, so the next time you're running an event, let me know, because I don't want this to happen to anyone else.
Yeah.
And how much more of a like, this is a bad experience, but I'm sharing this to help others moment is that, in comparison to like, whoa, life is me.
Yeah.
So it is just this like thinking about that version that you want to be seen as online and in person, and how can you share these stories and these experiences in a way that can present you in the best possible way for your brand and your ambitions.
Yeah, no, completely. Now, touching back on self-promotion, for everyone, what if you can't see your pros and your cons, your highs and your lows? When you're in your own body, it's really hard to see the good and the bad. Like, I always think when you go to someone's house, you're like, oh my God, I love your bars. And they're like, oh, really? What bars? And they haven't even seen it because they're in the room. Yeah. So how, if we're trying to self-promote and we're trying to kind of showcase our best parts, and like, how, if you don't even see those parts, do you recommend someone go about doing it?
So I have a WhatsApp group with 2 friends where we share our wins before dins on a Friday, where we voice note 2 to 3 things that week that we've done that we're proud of. And the reason that works is because we started in the pandemic, where we basically set up a WhatsApp group. We'd all quit our job at the same time, and we wanted to ask each other questions. We're going through a tough time. We were like, how do we reply to this client? What do we do here? And because we were kind of like speaking all week, it was getting to the end of the week, and we were like, well, it's been a tough week, but well done you for doing that thing. And we basically turned it into this wins before dins. What I love about this idea is that it's accountability to regularly self-reflect on the things that you've done that week that you're either happy with or you're happy you tried doing. So it's small steps of growth. And I always say to people, it doesn't need to be about winning a big account. It does not need to be big wins. It could be like, I got out every day this week for lunch and I let the light see my face. And that's a big win as a founder. Or I shut down my laptop at 6 and spent time with my kids. That is actually a win. So I always recommend to people regular self-reflection, once a week, end of the week, 30 minutes tops. Write down 2 or 3 things that you've done that you're happy with. And then you'll regularly start to see those small steps of growth, so that by the time it gets to the end of the year, whether it's a review, whether it's just your 2024 roundup, you actually have something to look back on. I also have a happy moments or a proud moments folder in my phone. So I screenshot anything like this coming to speak on a podcast, and I'll put it in this folder on my phone. So I've got a visual archive of all the things that I'm doing throughout the year. And it's a really great thing to come back to and look at when you're struggling with imposter syndrome, when you're like, oh God, can I do this? And you go back and you're like, look at all the things I've done over the years. Of course I can do this. So I think those two things of written self-reflection and a visual diary really help. But most importantly, it's other people. It's other people reminding you when you can't remind yourself. Wait a minute, you said your boss said something nice the other day, or what are you talking about? Like, you've been an incredible support to me this week, so who cares if you didn't get that work win? I've needed you and you've really helped me this week. It's having those people, whether it's your partners, your friends, you know, accountability partners, like whoever it is, that can just say to you, I can see it, even if you can't. And that's really helpful when you're navigating those moments when you really do struggle to see a good day. I really resonate with that. I've been there before, and having those diaries and having those people around you to remind you are so helpful.
No, that's really good advice. And why should we self-promote? So if people listening, that's like, okay, I need to self-promote more, but why? Whether it's professional life, social life, relationship, because I feel like self-promotion comes into all of those categories. Why should we do it?
Self-promotion is a confidence building task. So aside from external validation, it is about internally validating yourself. When I reflect on putting together like the Q1 updates of what I've done in the last quarter, I'm like, shit, I did that. I'm so happy with myself. Like, I don't even need to post this. I did all these things. I'm really happy. Or when I negotiate a good deal and I'm like, yeah, I just put myself forward for that. I've just added an extra £200 on my day rate or whatever. It's like, I did that, right? You cannot see these moments of growth and you cannot develop unless you invest in these types of self-promotion, of putting yourself out there. I've had people voice message me recently to be like, I watched your video and it really helped me. Like, just a small voice message goes such a long way. And I think self-promotion has the power to support other people and inspire other people around you. So if nothing else, do it for yourself, 100%. It's a confidence building task. But think about how your self-promotion could help the people around you. Think about how you could be a role model.
And in terms of manifestation, do you think that self-promotion is kind of linked to that as well? Because I think we're hearing the word manifestation more and more and more now, and I believe in it so much. And whether your manifestation is a vision board, whether it's your thoughts in your head, but I think, do you think they're linked?
I think there's definitely something beneficial about speaking, visualizing, or presenting an idea out into the world that you would like to achieve. And I can't say I actively manifest, but I do at the start of each year kind of think about, right, what are the things I really want to do this year? And in the last few years, they've been happening. So I don't know what it is. I believe in speaking things into existence. So I believe that at the start of the year that we met, actually, I said, I want to deliver a keynote speech. I want to be a keynote speaker and I want to deliver talks internationally. I was like, I wrote that in my Notion template and I said, these are the things that I want to do. And I applied for lots of conferences. I didn't get any gigs and I was a bit upset and I didn't get any international gigs. Everything that I was putting myself out for, I wasn't getting. And I was like, ugh. And then literally about a month before the event that we met, I got asked to be a keynote speaker, speaking just before Stephen Bartlett. And then not long after that, I got asked to do my first international gig. And there was something where I was like, I came back to being like, I've been saying this since January and it's now October and it's happening. So there was that feeling of like, even if it had nothing to do with it, it felt like I had been putting it out to the universe. And I do believe that if you think it, if you then start speaking it, if you then start telling people, it's more likely to happen. Yeah. It is more likely to happen than if you keep it in your head and you never mention it to anyone.
Completely.
So I've got loads of friends who are like, oh, I'd love to write a book. And I'm like, I mean, I can intro you to my publisher if you'd like. And they're like, no, absolutely not. And they're people who aren't ready to manifest or put that thing into place, or because actually, if they started telling everybody, oh, I really want to write a book, at least 5 or 6 people would, from one contact to another, would recommend you, and they say, oh, my mate wants to write a, like, it happens all the time. I'll meet you today and I'll be like, oh, just did this podcast with this woman and she's doing this, and it's like, unless you're speaking it, and that's why I say speak things into existence. So I think vision boards are great, but if those vision boards only stay at home for you to see, there's still a risk that it's only in your world. It's relying only on you to fulfill that. Whereas I believe in speaking your ideas and your ambitions to as many people, whether it's throwaway and like, oh God, I'd love to have a TV show one day like Oprah, which I would, sort of thing, or whether it's like, oh, I'd just love to have like a remote island job where I've got selling all my products out there. It could be one person saying, oh, my friend's done that, or, oh, you know, if you want to do that, I know someone at ITV, or, you know, just one person that could open that door for you. Completely. But it will not happen if you don't speak it.
Yes.
So that's my take on manifestation.
So true. I think also kind of, there's 2 things. I think it holds you accountable slightly, because you're like, well, I've spoken it now, so I've got to do it. And I think also it will happen when it's ready, but it's kind of, it's being put out there, and energies attract. And I think, as you say, one conversation leads to more. You've been held accountable, and it's out there now. So let's just see what happens. Like I've always said, and now I'm saying it on here because who knows, but I've always said, like, I'd love Catch Ups in My Kitchen to become a show. And before that, I'd love to be a presenter on TV. So I keep putting it out there. I keep saying it to people. I keep saying it to my family, my friends, and I'm just like, I'm just putting it out there. That's what I'd like to happen, but let's just wait and see.
And I guess it comes back to that delusional confidence that we were talking about. It's like, would you rather put something out there and somebody or lots of people be keeping an eye out for you and saying your name or mentioning that idea, or to have never said that thing publicly and to never ever have people looking out for you? It's really your choice, you know, like when you break it down that simply, it's like, do you want people out there advocating for you, talking about you, or would you rather do it all alone and maybe not get those results by yourself?
Yeah,
it's up to you.
Completely. So I kind of want to finish with your journey to self-promotion, because we've spoken about how amazing it is, but and as I mentioned earlier, we're not born self-promoters. So how did you get to this position? What was your previous career, and how did you turn this into a career?
So I have to say, my dad has always worked in sales, and I would say from a young age he has been able to educate us on how to really back ourselves and how to sell things in. So I remember working at Barrett's Shoes, which is a high street shoe shop that most people won't remember now, but it was not very nice. And I remember showing my dad what I'd written on my CV about my work experience, my Saturday job at a shoe shop, and he was like, let me add some magic to this. And he basically, I sounded like a shoe entrepreneur at the end of it. But what he showed me was how to take successes and how to turn them into like business impact, or how to really demonstrate the value that I bring. So it's not worked Saturday shifts, 9 till 5 serving customers. It's helped to increase business profits by upselling shoe care, which is what I was doing every week, you know. And I think that was so helpful. So that was at like the age of 16, understanding how to take these things that we're doing and turn them from just being a statement into being a success, into being a business impact success. So that was quite an early exposure I got, probably at like the age of 16, from my dad, because he did work in sales. Then I went on to study fashion communication and promotion at university at Nottingham Trent, and that was like 3 years of The Apprentice. So we would get live briefs, we'd have 3 days to respond, and then we'd be pitching it to the head office at Unilever. So it was like real live action. We were working with people we didn't know or we didn't really like. We'd have to come up with the strategy, we'd have to public speak, we'd have to come up with the creative ideas, and then we would be standing in front of the marketing director at Unilever and presenting our ideas. Like, it was this fast-paced turnaround thing. And then we did an entire semester on self-promotion. And so I have to have a big shout out basically to my university, because they were the people that really ingrained the importance of that. And that was, I'm 32 now, so that was over 10 years ago. I came out of university with a business card, a logo, a portfolio, a website, and I was ready. to network, and I knew how to personal brand, and we'd been studying that for a semester, and we all got taught the same thing, but not everyone's gone on to do the same thing. So obviously I was quite interested in this space and I was quite fascinated by it. And then my early career before starting Fuck Being Humble was advertising, so storytelling, working in pitching, selling, promoting ideas. And I learned so much about how to get clients on board, a big part of my final job was that I was a new business director. So I was trying to find clients' work. I was trying to find opportunities for the business. And learning how to sell was so different to just selling in ideas. So one of the things that I was trying to do was win 100 grand projects for our company so that it would survive when I worked at a startup. And having the responsibility going from, I'm getting paid a salary, it doesn't really matter, to my salary is actually influenced by how much business I bring in. It was a very quick exposure of what it's like to go out there and self-promote. So I think I've had different stepping stones, from a salesman dad to doing a whole semester on self-promotion and learning about marketing, to then being in the advertising industry and understanding the power of storytelling, how we connect with people, how to emotionally engage, I was really interested in, obviously, it's not that surprising now, in challenger brands, in disruptive brands. I liked advertisements that really rocked the boat. I loved non-profit campaigns because I thought they were really meaningful. So it was a lot of that experience, that journey helped me to understand why this is so needed. But having had that early experience in advertising on how to sell the company and how to win large clients or how to generate awareness about the company and buzz, was a great stepping stone before I quit my full-time job to run my own business. So yeah, it was a real whirlwind, but I think all of those things, it's interesting how I've always been a very chatty person. I've always been good at sales. I've always been quite creative. I've always been a community connector, people person, and it's still coming through 10 years later in my work. So I think for me, I've found, what I realized when I worked in advertising is I was selling people things they didn't need, and I didn't feel that comfortable doing that. Whereas now I've taken the storytelling knowledge and expertise that I grew, and I'm helping individuals tell their personal story. And that's where I just feel my most content, because I can see the positive value I'm making on individuals. And that has been my kind of journey through to self-promotion. But it's been a lot of learning on the job. And especially given that Fuck Being Humble started nearly 6 years ago, it was way ahead of people talking about self-promotion. People talked about personal branding, but the word self-promotion had a massive ick label attached to it. And it was oh gosh, I can't believe you're even mentioning that word. Yeah. So to build an entire business around it has both been challenging and, difficult, but also I think the secret sauce that has helped us stand out, because nobody, like I said, wanted to explore self-promotion before the pandemic, and nobody thought it was a priority. And now everybody is knocking on my door, and now everybody sees the power of it, because things aren't as certain as they used to be. So yeah, I think I've always been a natural storyteller. I think my dad always jokes that from the age of 4 or 5 I was telling stories and wowing crowds sort of thing. So I think it was only natural that I would end up working with people in this space.
Yeah, I love that. And I think also we are all our own brand. And I think that gets missed a lot, especially if you're, I don't know, in the corporate world. You might not feel like you are a brand, but you are. Everyone's a brand. And I think I always think about your own PR team. You have to kind of get the PR working and sell yourself, because no one else is going to sell it for you, regardless who you are, what you do. I think it's so important. So when I remember meeting you for the first time, and when you spoke, I was oh my God, it's so true. And I never realised the importance of it until I was working for myself. But I think it's important for everyone, no matter what you do, who you are, because like you say, the pandemic happened and everyone's lives were completely turned upside down. So you never know when you've got to switch it on. So yeah.
I actually think it should be education in schools.
Yeah.
When I think about, I was talking to a friend recently about A-levels, and we were talking about general studies and some of the things that we were what a waste of time they were. But I think they should. In the same way I had a whole semester on self-promotion, I think before you leave higher education, you should be taught about self-promotion and the importance of it.
So true. So I like to finish with the final question, which is bringing it all back to food. So what would your last meal be? Starter, main course and dessert.
I love this question. I'm going to caveat, I have quite a basic palate.
Absolutely fine.
I love like beige foods.
I love it.
So I love loaded potato skins as my like starter, like TGI Fridays, picture that kind of vibe.
Yeah.
And then again, it's quite boring, but just a really great spaghetti bolognese.
Oh, yeah,
like just one final dish, garlic bread on the side, parmesan on top. And quite randomly, I love apple strudel.
Oh.
Yeah, my grandma always used to make it for me, and I just got this sweet spot for it. And I'd probably have to have a side of crisps and an espresso martini.
I love that.
Such a mix that does not go well together.
No, but it's your last meal, so it's fine.
Yeah, it's fine.
But you had that in the bag ready to go.
I've discussed this over the years. It's changed a lot, but I think right now that's probably the answer I'd give.
I love it. Steph, thank you so much for coming on and giving us a pep talk we all needed. I think you start the year in January with like a real fire and like, this is gonna be my year and I'm gonna do this, that and the other. We're now in May and it's like, it's not 6 months yet. Have we achieved everything? Well, no, it's only been 5 months. But sometimes we need that like kick that I think this episode will hopefully give everyone. It's important to be like, yeah, I have got this and I need to make sure I'm selling myself and like, the sun's out now, like come on, like reboot, reset those goals, reflect. So yeah, I think this episode definitely provided that. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been so nice to chat.